Kyle Perry strode into the prestigious Galactic Academy lecture hall, his heart pounding as hundreds of alien eyes fixed on him, the lone human in a sea of tentacles, scales, and exoskeletons. He was humanity's first and only student at the Academy, and failure here could mean the end of Earth's hopes for galactic integration. At 22 years old, Kyle stood an imposing 6'2", with close-cropped brown hair and piercing green eyes that scanned the auditorium, meeting the curious and sometimes wary gazes of his classmates. As he made his way to his assigned seat, a towering, blue-scaled Sele with 4 gleaming eyes approached him. "Kyle Perry?" the Sele asked, his voice a deep rumble. "I am Pollux, your roommate. Follow me to our dormitory." The pair navigated the sprawling campus, passing by towering crystalline structures and lush alien gardens. Pollux, like most Sele, maintained a cautious distance from Kyle, having heard unsettling rumors about the violent nature of humans and their war-torn homeworld. Their shared room was spacious, with 2 beds, desks, and a large window that offered a breathtaking view of the Academy grounds. As Kyle unpacked his belongings, he noticed an impressive display of ancient Sele weapons adorning the walls. "I'm fascinated by the history of warfare," Pollux explained, noting Kyle's interest. "It's a concept that's largely foreign to us Sele. We've evolved beyond such primitive conflicts." Kyle grinned, sensing an opportunity to bridge the gap between their species. "Well, if it's war stories you want, I've got plenty to share. Earth's history is filled with them, from ancient battles to modern conflicts that shaped our world." As word spread of the humans' captivating tales, curious students began to gather in their dormitory, eager to hear more about the enigmatic and dangerous world of humanity. Kyle knew that this was his chance to make a lasting impression, to show his classmates that humans were more than just the violent, unpredictable species they had been led to believe. He had to succeed, not just for himself, but for the future of Earth's relationship with the galactic community. The stakes were high, and Kyle was determined to rise to the challenge, one war story at a time. As Kyle's tales of war and conflict captivated the growing crowds of Sele students, his reputation spread throughout the academy. One day, a knock sounded at the door of his shared dormitory. Kyle opened it to find an elderly Sele with pale green scales and a long white beard standing before him. "Kyle Perry, I presume?" the Sele asked, his voice calm and measured. "I am Professor Zorn, a historian specializing in comparative civilizations. I've heard much about your fascinating accounts of Earth's history, and I was hoping you might share some of that knowledge with my students." Kyle's eyes widened. He knew of Professor Zorn by reputation, a renowned scholar whose works on the rise and fall of galactic empires were required reading for all students at the Academy. "It would be an honor, Professor," Kyle replied, barely containing his excitement. On the day of the lecture, Kyle stood before a packed auditorium, hundreds of Sele eyes fixed upon him. He began with the ancient civilizations of Earth, the Egyptians who built towering pyramids and mummified their dead, the Greeks with their pantheon of gods and legendary heroes, and the Romans who forged a vast empire through conquest and ingenuity. As he spoke, Kyle could see the fascination in the eyes of his audience, but he knew he couldn't paint a rosy picture of human history. He delved into the darker chapters, the centuries of slavery that fueled the economies of great nations, the genocides born of hatred and fear, and the development of weapons capable of annihilating entire cities in a single blast. The Sele listened in rapt attention, their scales rippling with a mix of awe and horror. When Kyle finished his lecture, a barrage of questions followed. The students wanted to know more about these strange, violent creatures called humans and the turbulent world that had shaped them. As the last of the students filed out of the auditorium, Professor Zorn approached Kyle, his ancient eyes gleaming with admiration. "That was a remarkable lecture, young man," he said. "Your knowledge of human history is impressive, and your willingness to confront the darker aspects of your species' past is commendable." Kyle felt a rush of pride at the professor's words. "Thank you, sir. I believe it's important to be honest about our history, both the good and the bad. It's the only way we can learn from it." Zorn nodded, his long beard swaying with the motion. Indeed, which is why I have a proposition for you. I'm in need of a research assistant for my upcoming project on the comparative development of human and Sci civilizations. Your unique perspective and knowledge would be invaluable. Would you be interested? Kyle's heart leaped at the opportunity. Working with Professor Zorn would not only further his own understanding of Sci culture, but it would also provide a platform to share his knowledge of humanity with a wider audience. He knew this was a chance to make a real difference, to bridge the gap between two species that had so much to learn from each other. I would be honored, Professor, Kyle said, shaking Zorn's outstretched hand. When do we start? Kyle's days as Professor Zorn's research assistant settled into a comfortable rhythm of poring over ancient texts and engaging in stimulating discussions about the comparative histories of their civilizations. One afternoon, as Kyle carefully turned the fragile pages of a crumbling manuscript, a passage caught his eye. It described a group of humans who had crash-landed on Thona thousands of years ago, long before the Galactic Academy had been established. As Kyle read on, his heart raced with excitement. The text revealed that these humans, led by a warrior named Argos, had fought alongside the Sci against a common enemy, the Zorgans. These insectoid creatures had once threatened to conquer the galaxy, and the unlikely alliance between humans and Sci had been instrumental in defeating them. Kyle burst into Professor Zorn's office, the ancient manuscript clutched in his hands. "Professor, you won't believe what I've found," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Zorn looked up from his desk, his pale green scales shimmering in the light. "What is it, Kyle?" Kyle placed the manuscript on the desk, pointing to the passage he had discovered. "It's a record of humans and Sci working together, thousands of years ago. They fought against the Zorgans, a race that once threatened the entire galaxy." Zorn's eyes widened as he read the passage, his long white beard quivering with excitement. "This is incredible, Kyle. I had no idea our species had such a history together." Over the next few weeks, Kyle and Professor Zorn delved deeper into the mystery of the ancient human-Sci alliance. They scoured the library for any additional references to the Zorgans or the warrior Argos, piecing together clues from various historical sources. As they worked, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. They uncovered evidence suggesting that the Zorgans, thought to have been defeated millennia ago, may have survived and were now planning a new invasion. Zorn nodded gravely. "You're right, Kyle. We must bring this to the attention of the Galactic Council. They are the only ones with the power to mobilize a defense against such a threat." The Galactic Council, the governing body of the known universe, convened an emergency meeting to hear Kyle and Professor Zorn's findings. The council members, representing a diverse array of species from across the galaxy, listened with growing concern as the pair presented their evidence. At first, some of the council members were skeptical, finding it hard to believe that a long-forgotten enemy could suddenly re-emerge. But as Kyle and Zorn continued to lay out their case, the overwhelming evidence began to sway even the most doubtful among them. As the gravity of the situation sank in, the council members began to discuss strategies for preparing for the impending Zorgon invasion. Kyle, with his unique perspective as a human and his knowledge of Earth's military history, found himself at the center of these discussions. The council's leader, a towering Sci with deep blue scales, turned to Kyle. "Your insights into warfare and your connection to this ancient alliance between our species make you uniquely qualified to advise us in this crisis. We would like to appoint you as a special advisor to the Council, tasked with developing strategies to counter the Zorgon threat." Kyle's heart raced at the unexpected offer. He glanced at Professor Zorn, who nodded encouragingly. This was an opportunity to make a real difference, to protect not just his own species, but the entire galaxy. "I accept," Kyle said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to ensure that the Zorgans are defeated, just as they were all those centuries ago." As the council meeting adjourned, Kyle knew that his time at the Galactic Academy had taken an unexpected turn. He was no longer just a student or a research assistant. He was now a key player in a galactic conflict that would determine the fate of countless worlds. The weight of this responsibility settled on his shoulders, but Kyle was ready to face the challenge head-on. Kyle's heart pounded as he read the urgent message from his father, Admiral John Perry. The holographic display flickered, casting an eerie blue glow across his face. The Zorgons had developed a planet-destroying weapon, and time was running out. Kyle burst into Professor Zorn's office, his voice tight with urgency. "Professor, we have a problem. The Zorgons have a new weapon that could wipe out entire worlds." Zorn's scales rippled with concern. "We must bring this to the Galactic Council immediately." In the council chambers, the debate raged. Some members pounded the table, demanding swift military action. Others urged caution, insisting on diplomacy. Kyle stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I have a plan. We infiltrate the Zorgon homeworld and sabotage their weapon before they can use it." Silence fell. The council leader fixed Kyle with a piercing gaze. "You propose a covert mission?" Kyle nodded. "My father's fleet can provide a distraction while a small team sneaks in. I'll lead it myself." Murmurs rippled through the council. The leader raised a clawed hand. "The humans' plan has merit. All in favor?" One by one, the council members nodded. Kyle felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. As Kyle prepared for the mission, he met his team, a group of battle-hardened Sele warriors and a squad of human special forces operatives. They eyed each other warily, old prejudices simmering beneath the surface. Kyle stepped forward, his voice firm. "I know we come from different worlds, but today we fight as one. The fate of the galaxy depends on us." The Sele commander, a scarred veteran named Thax, nodded. "The human is right. We must put aside our differences and focus on the mission." As the team boarded the sleek black stealth ship, Kyle felt a mix of fear and determination. He knew the odds were against them, but he also knew that failure was not an option. The survival of countless worlds hung in the balance. The ship slipped silently through the void, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to Zorgon sensors. Kyle stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen as the Zorgon homeworld loomed before them. The SS Phantom sliced silently through the void, its cloaking device engaged. Kyle stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen. Pollux, Rigel, Antares, Jack, Ethan, and Connor gathered around him, their faces tense. As they approached the Zorgon homeworld, a pulsing energy shield came into view, encasing the entire planet in an impenetrable barrier. "We need to find a way through that shield," Pollux growled, his four eyes narrowing. Kyle's mind raced, drawing on the military history he had studied. The Trojans once used a diversion to infiltrate their enemy's city. We could do something similar here. "We send a remote-controlled drone to stage a fake attack on a Zorgon outpost," Kyle explained. "While they're distracted, we slip through the shield undetected." The team nodded, and Connor set to work programming the drone. Minutes later, it streaked towards the planet's surface, simulating a bomber. Alarms blared across the Zorgon outpost as the drone unleashed a barrage of simulated explosions. Swarms of insectoid fighters scrambled to intercept the apparent threat. "Now's our chance," Kyle said, his voice tight. "Take us in, Ethan." The SS Phantom dove towards the planet, passing through the energy shield like a ghost. They landed in a dense jungle, the ship's camouflage blending seamlessly with the foliage. The team disembarked, weapons at the ready. The air was thick and humid, filled with the drone of alien insects. As they pushed through the undergrowth, a burst of plasma fire seared the leaves beside Kyle's head. Zorgon warriors emerged from the shadows, their exoskeletons gleaming. Jack and Antares reacted instantly, their weapons spitting bolts of energy. 2 Zorgons fell, their carapaces smoldering. More warriors poured from the jungle, accompanied by robotic sentinels bristling with weaponry. The team fought back, plasma and laser fire crisscrossing the battlefield. Kyle ducked behind a tree, his heart pounding. He signaled to Pollux, and together they flanked the Zorgon line, catching the warriors in a crossfire. As the last Zorgon fell, the team pressed on, the jungle giving way to a clearing dominated by a massive fortified structure. "The weapon," Rigel breathed, his scales rippling with anticipation. But as they approached, a secondary energy field shimmered into existence, barring their path. Elite Zorgon soldiers, their armor adorned with glowing sigils, emerged to stand guard. Kyle gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They had come too far to fail now. He glanced at his team, seeing the determination in their eyes. Together, they would find a way to breach these defenses and destroy the weapon that threatened the galaxy. The fate of countless worlds depended on it. Kyle frowned, glancing at Pollux. The Seeley warrior's scales rippled with suspicion. "It could be a trap," Pollux growled. But Zax persisted, his voice urgent. "I have vital information about the weapon facility's defenses. I can help you breach the secondary energy field." Kyle's mind raced, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. If Zax was telling the truth, his knowledge could be invaluable. But if this was a trick... "What do you want in return?" Kyle asked, his voice steady. "Asylum," Zax replied. "Protection from the Zorgon leadership. I can no longer stand by as they threaten the galaxy." Kyle made his decision. "Provide us with the intel and we'll consider your offer." Zax's information proved accurate. He guided them through the facility's labyrinthine corridors, his knowledge of the layout and security measures allowing them to avoid detection. As they approached the weapons control room, Zax produced a small device from his pack. "A modified EMP," he explained. "It will disrupt the energy field long enough for us to enter." With a crackle of electricity, the field flickered and died. Kyle, Pollux, and Zax slipped inside while the rest of the team fanned out to plant the explosives. The control room was a vast chamber, dominated by a pulsing, crystalline structure, the heart of the planet-destroying weapon. And there, standing before it, was General Zerg. The Zorgon leader was a towering figure, his exoskeleton gleaming in the eerie light, his eyes multifaceted and cold, fixed on the intruders. "You dare to challenge me," Zerg hissed, his mandibles clicking together. "You will die here and your worlds will follow." He lunged forward, his enhanced strength and speed making him a blur of motion. Kyle and Pollux met his charge, their weapons flashing. Zax, unarmed but determined, tried to aid his new allies. He leaped onto Zerg's back, attempting to distract him, but the general's reflexes were too quick. A swipe of his claws sent Zax flying, his body crumpling against the wall. Kyle, seeing Zax's bravery, redoubled his efforts. He ducked under Zerg's guard, his plasma blade scoring a deep gash in the general's thorax. Pollux pressed the advantage, his energy rifle pulsing as he targeted Zerg's joints, seeking to immobilize him. But Zerg was relentless, his rage fueling his attacks. He caught Kyle with a vicious backhand, sending him sprawling. As Kyle struggled to rise, he saw Zax crawling towards them, a trail of viscous green blood marking his path. The scientist's breath rattled in his throat, his eyes dimming. "The weapon," Zax gasped, his voice fading. "It can only be deactivated by Zorgon DNA. Use Zerg's against him." With those final words, Zax slumped to the floor, his life extinguished. Kyle felt a surge of grief and anger, tempered by a grim resolve. He met Pollux's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They had to end this here and now. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Kyle rose to his feet, his grip tightening on his weapon. Zerg loomed before him, a nightmare-given form. But Kyle knew that even the strongest enemy had a weakness. They just had to find it and exploit it. The battle raged on, the fate of countless worlds resting on the outcome of this desperate struggle. Kyle's mind raced, seeking a way to turn Zerg's own biology against him, to use the general's DNA to bring an end to his twisted ambitions. As the battle with Zerg raged on, Kyle's mind raced through the annals of human history, searching for a strategy that could turn the tide in their favor. Suddenly he remembered the legend of the Trojan horse, a cunning ploy that had allowed the Greeks to infiltrate and conquer the city of Troy. With a surge of inspiration, Kyle called out to Pollux, "We need to use his own biology against him. Keep him busy while I get a sample of his DNA." Pollux nodded, his scales gleaming with sweat as he parried Zerg's relentless attacks. Kyle ducked and weaved, searching for an opening. When Zerg's attention was momentarily diverted, Kyle lunged forward, his plasma blade slicing through the general's exoskeleton and drawing a thin line of viscous green blood. Quickly, Kyle swiped the blood onto a small device, his heart pounding as he prayed that it would be enough. With Zerg's genetic signature now in hand, Kyle and Pollux made a break for the weapons control room. They burst through the doors, Kyle's fingers flying across the console as he uploaded Zerg's DNA into the system. The screen flashed green, granting him access to the weapon's core functions. But as they turned to leave, a group of Zorgon soldiers flooded into the room, their weapons trained on the intruders. Kyle and Pollux exchanged a glance, knowing that they were outnumbered and outgunned. Pollux stepped forward, his energy rifle humming to life. "Go," he said, his voice steady. "I'll hold them off. Get the team out of here." Kyle hesitated, his heart torn between the desire to save his friend and the need to complete the mission. But he knew that Pollux was right. If they didn't evacuate now, none of them would make it out alive. With a final nod, Kyle turned and ran, his boots pounding against the metal floor as he raced towards the extraction point. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of battle, the sizzle of plasma, and the crunch of exoskeletons. He burst out of the facility, his lungs burning as he sprinted towards the SS Phantom. Jack and the rest of the team were already on board, the engines humming with power. As Kyle leaped into the ship, he felt the ground beneath them shudder. The explosives they had planted were detonating, setting off a chain reaction that would destabilize the planet's core. The SS Phantom lifted off, its cloaking device engaged as it streaked away from the crumbling planet. From orbit, Kyle watched as the Zorgon homeworld imploded, the once mighty civilization reduced to dust and rubble. But even as relief washed over him, Kyle felt the weight of their losses. Pollux, his friend and ally, had sacrificed himself to ensure the mission's success, and Zax, the brave Zorgon defector, had given his life to help them stop his own people's twisted ambitions. As the SS Phantom set a course for home, Kyle knew that their victory had come at a heavy price, but he also knew that without the sacrifices of Pollux and Zax, the galaxy would have faced an even greater threat. The SS Phantom descended through Thona's atmosphere, its hull still scorched from the fiery battle against the Zorgons. As the ship settled onto the landing pad, a sea of cheering Selay and humans greeted Kyle and his battered team. They disembarked to a hero's welcome, the crowd parting as they made their way to the towering Galactic Council chambers. Inside, the council members rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the vaulted hall. The council leader, his blue scales gleaming, stepped forward. "Kyle Perry, in recognition of your bravery and sacrifice in the face of unimaginable danger, we hereby present you with the Galactic Medal of Valor." Kyle bowed his head as the medal was placed around his neck, its weight a reminder of the price they had paid for victory. As the applause died down, Professor Zorn took the podium, his voice heavy with emotion. "We gather here today to honor not only the living, but also those who gave their lives so that we might stand here now. Pollux, a true hero, embodied the spirit of courage and selflessness that defines the best of us. May his sacrifice never be forgotten." As the ceremony concluded, Kyle found himself surrounded by well-wishers, their gratitude overwhelming. But amidst the celebration, a mysterious figure caught his eye, a Selay with jet-black scales and piercing silver eyes. The Selay approached, his voice low and urgent. "Kyle Perry, I am Vega. I have information you need to hear." Kyle frowned, his instincts on high alert. What kind of information? Vega glanced around, ensuring they couldn't be overheard. The Zorgons have a secret base hidden in the Orcs asteroid field. They're developing a new weapon there, one capable of destroying entire star systems. Kyle's blood ran cold. The thought of the Zorgons rising again, so soon after their costly victory, was chilling. He knew he couldn't ignore this threat, not when so many had sacrificed so much. "I'll need a team," Kyle said, his mind already racing. "The best of the best." Vega nodded. "I will join you. My technical expertise may prove useful." Within hours, Kyle had assembled his squad, Jack, Ethan, Connor, and Vega. They boarded the SS Phantom once more, its battle scars a testament to their resolve. As they navigated the treacherous asteroid field, a sense of unease settled over the ship. The rocks drifted past, casting eerie shadows across the viewport. Suddenly alarms blared as a squadron of Zorgon fighters emerged from behind a massive asteroid, their plasma cannons blazing. "Evasive maneuvers!" Kyle shouted, his hands flying over the controls. The SS Phantom twisted and rolled, its shield straining under the onslaught. Jack and Ethan manned the gun turrets, their aim true as Zorgon ships exploded in bursts of flame. But the enemy kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. A well-placed shot from a Zorgon fighter penetrated the Phantom's shields, smoke filling the cockpit. "We're losing power," Connor yelled, his fingers a blur as he tried to reroute systems. Kyle gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. They couldn't fail, not now. Pollux's sacrifice had to mean something. With a final desperate maneuver, Kyle steered the crippled ship towards a massive asteroid, its surface pockmarked with craters. They hit the ground hard, the ship skidding across the rocky terrain before coming to a shuddering halt. In the sudden silence, Kyle looked around at his team, their faces grim but determined. They were alive but stranded deep in enemy territory. The fight, it seemed, was far from over. In the eerie silence of the asteroid's surface, Kyle and his team assessed the damage to the SS Phantom. The ship's hull was riddled with scorch marks, and one of the engines sputtered weakly. "We need to get her up and running," Kyle said, his voice tight with determination. "Jack, Ethan, see what you can do about the engine. Connor, check the life support systems." As the team set to work, Kyle and Vega ventured out to explore the asteroid, searching for any sign of the hidden Zorgon research facility. The landscape was bleak and unforgiving, a wasteland of jagged rocks and deep crevasses. Suddenly Vega's scanner beeped urgently. "I'm picking up an energy signature," she said, her silver eyes widening. "It's coming from over there." They followed the signal to a series of ancient ruins, half buried in the asteroid's surface. The structures were unlike anything Kyle had ever seen, with twisting spires and intricate carvings that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Who do you think built this place?" Kyle asked, running his fingers over the alien glyphs. They delved deeper into the ruins, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. In the heart of the complex they discovered a vast chamber, its walls lined with flickering screens and pulsing consoles. Vega's fingers flew over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm in," she said at last, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "And I've got the coordinates for the Zorgon facility." Armed with this new information, Kyle and Vega returned to the SS Phantom, where the rest of the team had managed to get the ship back in working order. They set a course for the Zorgon base, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As they approached the facility, Kyle's eyes narrowed. The base appeared to be abandoned, its corridors dark and lifeless. They touched down on a landing pad and disembarked, weapons at the ready. Inside they found only emptiness and echoes. The Zorgons had stripped the place bare, leaving behind nothing but dust and shadows. But as they searched the deserted labs and command centers, Vega made a discovery. "Look at this," she said, holding up a small crystalline data fragment. "It's heavily encrypted, but I think it might contain information about the Zorgon's new weapon." Before they could celebrate their find, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. On the base's security monitors, Kyle saw a massive Zorgon warship descending towards them, its weapons primed and ready. A voice boomed over the comm system, a voice that Kyle had hoped never to hear again. "Kyle Perry," Zerg growled, his tone dripping with malice. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Kyle's heart raced as he stared at the screen, taking in Zerg's new form. The Zorgon general was now a terrifying fusion of flesh and machine, his exoskeleton enhanced with gleaming cybernetics. Kyle's mind raced, seeking a way out of this impossible situation. And then he remembered a snippet of Zorgon lore that Professor Zorn had once shared with him. He stepped forward, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "I invoke the right of single combat," he declared, his eyes locked on Zerg's. "By the ancient code of your people, I challenge you to a duel. If I win, you and your forces will surrender. If I lose—" Zerg's mandibles twitched, a flicker of surprise crossing his grotesque features. For a long moment he was silent, the weight of Kyle's challenge hanging in the air. "Very well," the Zorgan general said at last, his voice a rumble of thunder. "I accept your challenge. Prepare to meet your doom, human." The warship's docking bay yawned open, and Kyle stepped forward ready to face his destiny. This was a fight that would decide not just his own fate, but the fate of the entire galaxy. The air aboard the Zorgan warship was thick with the stench of sweat and hydraulic fluid as Kyle faced off against Zerg. The general towered over him, his cybernetic enhancements glinting in the harsh light. "Foolish human," Zerg sneered, his claws flexing. "You think you can best me? I have evolved beyond anything your feeble species can comprehend." Kyle said nothing, his eyes narrowing as he slipped into a fighting stance. He thought of Pollux, of Zax, of all those who had sacrificed so much to bring him to this moment. He would not let them down. Zerg lunged forward, his enhanced speed and strength making him a blur of motion. Kyle rolled to the side, barely avoiding the razor-sharp talons that sliced through the air. They danced across the warship's deck, trading blows that would have shattered steel. Kyle could feel his muscles burning, his lungs screaming for air, but he pushed through the pain, drawing on reserves of strength he never knew he had. Zerg's cybernetic eye glowed red, tracking Kyle's every move. "You cannot win," the general growled, his voice a metallic rasp. "I am superior in every way." Kyle's mind raced, seeking a weakness, an opening, and then he saw it. A flicker of movement, a momentary hesitation in Zerg's defenses. He feinted left, then spun right, his blade flashing out in a blinding arc. The plasma cut through Zerg's exoskeleton like a hot knife through butter, severing the general's cybernetic arm at the elbow. Zerg howled in rage and pain, his remaining claw slashing wildly. But Kyle was already moving, diving beneath the blow and coming up behind the general. With a final desperate thrust, he plunged his blade into the gap between Zerg's armor plates, piercing the Zorgan's heart. The general stiffened, his mechanical eye flickering and dying as his life drained away. Around them, the Zorgan soldiers stood in stunned silence, their weapons lowering as they realized their leader had fallen. Kyle stood over Zerg's corpse, his chest heaving, his blade slick with alien blood. "It's over," he said, his voice ringing out through the warship's halls. "By the code of your people, I have won. Lay down your arms and surrender." One by one, the Zorgans complied, their weapons clattering to the deck. Kyle's team emerged from the shadows, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and awe. Vega held up the data fragment, her eyes shining with triumph. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've got what we came for." Kyle nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. They had won the battle, but he knew the war was far from over. The data fragment was just the beginning, a clue that would lead them deeper into the Zorgon's twisted machinations. But for now, as they boarded the SS Phantom and set a course for home, Kyle allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had struck a blow against the Zorgans and shown the galaxy that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The fight would continue, but with the help of his friends and allies, both human and Sele, Kyle knew they would prevail. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The legend of Kyle Perry was just beginning. Upon returning to Thona, Kyle and his team wasted no time analyzing the data fragment they had recovered from the abandoned Zorgon research facility. Vega, her silver eyes narrowed in concentration, pored over the encrypted files, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. After hours of tireless work, she finally cracked the code. "By the stars," she breathed, her scales rippling with a mix of awe and horror. The Zorgons were developing a bioengineered virus designed to wipe out all non-Zorgon life in the galaxy. Kyle leaned in, his heart pounding as he scanned the data. The virus, created using genetic material from various species, including humans and Sele, was set to be released through a network of sleeper agents scattered across the galaxy. "We have to stop them," Kyle said, his voice tight with urgency. "If that virus is released, billions will die." The team sprang into action, using the information from the data fragment to track down the sleeper agents. They raced from planet to planet, confronting the agents in a series of high-stakes battles. On the neon-lit streets of a sprawling metropolis on Zephyrus Prime, Kyle and Connor faced off against a pair of heavily armed Zorgon agents. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as they ducked and weaved, their weapons flashing. Connor dove behind a hovering transport, his rifle barking as he fired at the agents. One of the Zorgons fell, his carapace smoldering, but the other kept coming, his claws extended. Kyle leaped forward, his plasma blade humming as he engaged the Zorgon in close combat. They danced across the street, trading blows that would have shattered concrete. With a final desperate lunge, Kyle plunged his blade into the Zorgon's chest, the alien's eyes flickering and dying as it crumpled to the ground. "One down," Kyle panted, wiping the sweat from his brow. "But there are still more out there." They pressed on, confronting sleeper agents on a dozen worlds, each battle more brutal than the last. On the frozen wastes of Arcturus, Jack and Ethan battled a group of Zorgon agents amid a howling blizzard, the snow stained blue with alien blood. In the fungal jungles of Mycelium, Vega and Kyle fought side by side against a horde of infected creatures, the Zorgon virus having mutated the native life into grotesque, shambling monstrosities. Finally, they tracked the last sleeper agent to Earth, Kyle's homeworld. In a desperate battle atop a skyscraper in the heart of a gleaming city, Connor sacrificed himself to save Kyle, leaping in front of a plasma bolt meant for his friend. As Connor lay dying in Kyle's arms, he gripped his hand tight. "Finish it," he whispered, his eyes fierce despite the pain. "Don't let my death be in vain." With a heavy heart, Kyle and the others neutralized the final agent, preventing the release of the virus. The galaxy was saved, but the cost had been high. In the aftermath of the crisis, the Galactic Council implemented strict regulations on advanced technologies, hoping to prevent future threats. But for Kyle, the scars ran too deep. Haunted by the losses of Pollux and Connor, he left the Galactic Academy and returned to Earth, enlisting in the Earth Defense Force. He would protect his homeworld, no matter the cost. Years passed and Kyle grew old, his once brown hair now grey and his face lined with the weight of his experiences. He sat in his study, surrounded by mementos of his adventures, a Sele plasma rifle, a chunk of rock from the asteroid, a tattered photograph of his team. Suddenly a holographic message flickered to life before him. It was Vega, her silver eyes bright despite the years. "Kyle," she said, her voice urgent, "a new threat has emerged, an ancient evil that had been sealed away by the unknown alien civilization we encountered on the asteroid. We need you, Ede." Kyle stood, his old joints protesting as he donned his uniform once more. The fabric was faded and worn, but it still fit like a second skin. He knew he was old, that his reflexes had dulled and his strength had waned, but he also knew that he could not ignore this call to arms. The fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders, just as it had all those years ago. With a final, determined nod, Kyle set out to face this new challenge, ready to give everything he had to protect the innocent and safeguard the future. The stars awaited, and Kyle Perry, hero of the galaxy, would answer their call. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.